war in US history, and America is ready to end it. On March 10, the US began withdrawing troops from Afghanistan after signing a peace agreement with the Taliban, the same group that America invaded Afghanistan to oust.
Good afternoon. On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
This is the moment George W. Bush declared military action in Afghanistan back in 2001. Nearly 2 decades on, the US has pledged to withdraw its forces from Afghanistan, making a deal with the Taliban that now controls more territory than ever since the 2001 invasion. But can this deal actually work? Or is it just a ticket out for the US?
فإن جهاد الأمريكان وإن قتال الأمريكان هو من صميم الإيمان ومن صميم التوحيد.
On September 11, 2001, al-Qaeda operatives hijacked 4 commercial airliners. 2 of them crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City. Close to 3,000 people died in the attack. It was the deadliest on US soil. A total of 19 hijackers were involved in the attacks. None of them were Afghan nationals. But Afghanistan was the base for al-Qaeda leader and mastermind of the 9/11 attack, Osama bin Laden. In response, President George W. Bush decided to wage war on Afghanistan as part of his war against terror.
We will pursue nations that provide aid or safe haven to terrorism. Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Shortly after that speech, the US invaded Afghanistan to oust the Taliban, who refused to surrender bin Laden and other al-Qaeda figures linked to 9/11. The mission wasn't that easy. Within months, bin Laden had escaped to Pakistan, and although the Taliban lost the capital Kabul and most of the territories within months, the mountainous nature of Afghanistan provided a good hideout for militants. The war dragged on for almost 19 years, and the Americans were not ready for it. So why are the Americans only now leaving Afghanistan? The US invasion destabilized Afghanistan and created a political climate dependent on US aid and military support. In 2019, The Washington Post published an article titled "At War with the Truth," revealing secret documents from the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction about the war in Afghanistan. The document showed that high-ranking US officials believed that the war in Afghanistan was unwinnable, yet continuously misled the American public.
We're pleased with the progress being made.
We are on track to achieve our goals.
Great progress is being made.
The Afghan papers, published in 2019, revealed interview transcripts from key insiders describing what went wrong during the war.
We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. We didn't know what we were doing.
2 decades since the US invasion of Afghanistan, tens of thousands of civilians have been killed and millions have fled the country as refugees. The Taliban, on the other hand, have perpetrated countless human rights abuses against the Afghan people, especially women and minorities. They've banned girls from schools, persecuted minorities, and deprived the country from having resources to rebuild its infrastructure. On the American side, more than 2,000 service members have died and over 20,000 were wounded during the conflict. A total of 775,000 troops have been deployed since 2001. The war has cost the US nearly $1 trillion. To put this in perspective, the cost of war is almost 2 times the external debt of all African countries. The mission and objectives of the US in Afghanistan have evolved over the course of 3 US administrations, from combating terrorist groups to helping the Afghan government with training to reconstruction efforts, and for consecutive US administrations, Afghanistan was becoming an increasing burden.
We've been in there not fighting to win, just fighting to, they're building gas stations, they're rebuilding schools. The United States, we shouldn't be doing that. That's for them to do.
Since his 2016 presidential campaign, Trump has pledged to end what he has dubbed as the endless war. And as the 2020 presidential election dates are nearing, Trump wants his campaign promises fulfilled. In March 2020, the US and the Taliban signed an agreement aimed at withdrawing US forces and spurring the start of intra-Afghan talks.
The historic peace deal signed
between the US and the Taliban
after 18 months of talks and nearly 2 decades of war.
The agreement, signed in Doha, Qatar, lays out a timetable for the final withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan if the Taliban follows through on its commitment of guaranteeing that Afghan soil will not be used to threaten the security of the US and its allies. But the agreement excluded one important partner. the American-backed Afghan government.
Peace is a long process. It will not be possible to finish it within some months. It will be a very tough negotiation and tough deal.
But considering the Taliban's past and its ideology, many Afghans remain skeptical.
در دوره‌هایی که گفتگوها انجام شد اونا بارها مشخص ساختن که دیدگاهشان نسبت به زن تغییر آنچنانی نکرده و ما نگران این مسئله هستیم. ما از دولت افغانستان واسطیمی که قرار است مذاکره بکنه با
The peace agreement is set to introduce Afghanistan to a new era, but many members of the US Congress are skeptical.
I believe that the American people deserve to know what agreement has been entered into in our name with the terrorists who harbored those who killed 3,000 Americans on 9/11.
Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, talks between the government and the Taliban are still on hold as the country plunged into a political crisis after two rival presidents took oath, hindering prospects for lasting peace. The poverty rate in Afghanistan is rising. In 2012, 37% of Afghans were living below the poverty line. In 2020, over half the population does. So, as Afghanistan is still struggling on multiple fronts, has this deal been made in haste because the US wants to quit Afghanistan while avoiding responsibility for the consequences of its invasion?